Here we are, back again, and I don't think I have a lighter. Oh, well. No, actually, I do have a lighter. What am I saying? Why should I be lighterless in an era of, you gotta be happy, right? Like I say, it's always 4:20 at Pete's house. But I want to do something different this episode. I want to discuss Robert Mitchum and his son's involvement in Grindhouse films. Now, you might be saying, Robert Mitchum, he's an A-list actor. What does he have to do with Grindhouse films? Well, a lot, actually. I mean, he did, classic stuff in the 40s and 50s and in the 60s. But he made one film that was a fucking smash hit all over the place, especially in Grindhouses, called Thunder Road. And that was about moonshiners. And he cast his two sons, James and Chris, in roles. James was cast as his brother, and Chris, who was 13 years old, was the kid playing the washboard in the scene. So Bob was one of those resilient guys, and I'm a huge fan of his because I loved his acting, and I also loved the fact that he was one of the first major celebrities busted for weed. So that always entered into my liking of Bob. But the guy was a great actor, and he also was a chameleon because he could adapt to situations. And as we got into the 60s and 70s, things had to change. And he did quite a few films that, fell strictly into Grindhouse territory. One of them was a Western directed by Burt Kennedy, I believe, called The Good Guys and the Bad Guys, where he was a sheriff that was supposed to retire, and he was going to catch this old outlaw played by George Kennedy. And basically they had to team up to stop an outlaw gang led by David Carradine from robbing a train or a town or something like that. But the two films that really cemented his reputation for doing, a gritty Grindhouse type film were the two films where he played Detective Philip Marlowe, Farewell My Lovely and The Big Sleep. And Farewell My Lovely was, shot back in that, film noirish time where, you had hookers, thieves, junkies, all kinds of stuff. And that film had a great cast with, I think it was John Ireland, Harry Dean Stanton, a very young Sylvester Stallone, mentored by Joe Spinell. Joe Spinell was a big fan of Stallone's, for lack of better words, and one of the guys that really pushed Stallone and got him parts and things. But I'll say it right now, Stallone's pretty much a fucking scumbag in my estimation, because his people sort of pushed Joe out of the picture when Sly was starting to really get big and famous and stuff like that. And dude, you know something? You were at the New York City Comic Con about a year ago charging $650 for an autograph and a photo op with you. Like, you really need that money? Hey, fuck you, Sly, really. But going back to Mitchum, he was doing this whole thing in this like sleepy type film noir mode where they were trying basically to find this woman and money from a bank heist, and the sexy star was Charlotte Rampling, and this other gentleman was Moose Malloy, who was just out of jail and looking for his girl, and wound up that his girl was the character played by Charlotte Rampling after a lot of twists, curves, and other things going on. But that film was so popular that they did a second one, another remake called The Big Sleep, which this was shot in England. And another all-star cast with Jimmy Stewart, Candy Clark, Sarah Miles, Richard Boone, and Oliver Reed. And Oliver Reed so wanted to work with Robert Mitchum that he took a big salary cut just to get the part. This was another one where basically a whodunit and what was going on. And Richard Boone was a little bit ragged in this one. He was Lash Camino, the brown man. Everything he wore was brown, and he had a brown woman on his arm. And there was a big shootout between him and Philip Marlowe, which basically was two old hands just having a good time blowing the shit out of each other. Again, good whodunit. And Mitchum did a lot of other films, The Amsterdam Kill, and pretty much was active up until, the day he passed away. I think he was like 80 years old. But his two sons pursued acting careers, James and Chris. And there was two different stories on this thing because, again, they're hitting their stride in the 60s and 70s, very turbulent time. Now, James started doing these war movies. He appeared, not only in Thunder Road, but he had a small role in his father's film, The Last Time I Saw Archie, and did a couple of other films, Ambush Bay, which was shot in the Philippines, which, a lot of war movies back then were shot in the Philippines because it was cheap and easy. But this one, really, he was sort of like third build, and he was like sort of narrating the whole thing. And it was Mickey Rooney and Hugh O'Brien who were the other main stars. And like I said, he was basically narrating the thing, and pretty much, lasted until the end of the movie. Did a few other things, but then he went over to Italy and did Massacre at Grand Canyon for Sergio Corbucci. That was his first spaghetti western. Well, he went back to do one with Albert Band called The Tramplers, where he was third build. Joseph Cotton and Gordon Scott were also billed there. Story was, it was Cotton playing Temple Cordine, who was still fighting the Civil War down in Texas and fucking hanging people and hanging slaves and shit like that. Hobie and Lon, played by, Hobie was James Mitchum and Lon was Gordon Scott, are two of five brothers who basically are pitting against each other because Temple Cordine is the guy who wants total control, and when he finds out that this guy Charlie Garvey wants to marry his daughter, he sends Lon and Hobie out to take care of him. Well, Hobie, as James is playing him, is this sort of wussy guy who doesn't want to get involved in this stuff and doesn't like violence and just wants to get away. Well, when they meet Charlie Garvey, played by an early, very young Franco Nero, billed as Frank Nero, they decide to start a cattle business and get away from all this stuff, which they do. But of course, Dad's long hand reaches out and sends people to fuck with them, and they kill them all. And Hobie has to go find this guy that can get the cattle to market. So Hobie disappears for 3 months and shows up looking a lot worse for the wear and minus an arm, a left arm. It seems that Hobie has morphed in the 3 months to a completely psychotic gunfighter. When they're driving the cattle and they get attacked by rustlers, Hobie basically just blows a bunch of them away and shoots two in the leg, and when they're crawling away, he just walks up and starts shooting them in the back, much to the horror of Lon. So his character is much more developed at this point, where he's actually doing something, and of course there is going to be a face-off with the other brothers. And Lon and Hobie are trapped in this building, and Temple Cordine's men are basically trying to get in and kill him, and they're blowing these guys away like crazy. When finally Hobie decides to scream at the old man, why can't we settle this up between ourselves? We're family. Send everybody home. Send your army home. So it's brother against brother, and the other three brothers are killed. Hobie is killed, and then it's Gordine's mind sort of snaps, and then Lon decides to go back and make a go of their ranch because we got to, do better than what he did. Oddly, Joseph Cotton would reprise almost the same role in Sergio Corbucci's Hellbenders a couple of years later, with another litter of mad dog brothers looking to kill everybody. James started doing a lot of films overseas, The Invincible Six in Iran, which firmly planted him in grindhouse territory as a villain. Did a couple other ones. A Blackout, which was based on the 77 New York City blackout, where he's a cop and pretty much has to get these thugs out of a posh apartment building where they're terrorizing and looting the tenants. And then there was another really sleazy one called Trackdown, where his sister goes to Los Angeles to become a star. She's kidnapped, gang raped, sold to a pimp, taken in by a madam, but then given the wrong trick, who basically beats her to death. And of course, Jim comes to town and is pissed off, and a lot of fucking violent shit goes down as he gets revenge for his sister's murder. Jim sort of faded away. I guess he, retired a bit. I don't think he's really done anything since Genghis Khan, A Life Story in 2010. He was also married to actress Wendy Wagner, who was in one of my favorite films, Rio Conchos, as an Indian squaw. Now, Chris's story is a little bit different because Chris actually went to school, got a BA from the University of Arizona before he even got interested in film. Well, they were shooting a movie called Bigfoot, and he was doing production on it, and the star was going to be Jody McCrea, but Jody McCrea wanted $10,000 to be in it. So the producers nixed that and approached Chris with the lead, and he says, well, what's it paying? And they told him $500. He already knew about the $10,000 with Jody McCrea, and he goes, I'd rather just be the producer. So they basically talked him into taking the role, and they said he could produce as well. He got John Carradine cast in it, but what happened was he racked up about $29,000 in overtime, and they couldn't pay him. He had to settle for 10 cents on a dollar. So he was cast in a minor role in Chisholm with John Wayne, and he recalled an incident where basically he was standing with the Duke watching them film the scene with Billy the Kid with another actor, and the Duke turned to him and said, you know something, it should have been you playing Billy the Kid, not him. But the Duke sort of liked him and told him, look, I'm doing a film with Howard Hawks. I want to introduce you to Howard and see if I can get you cast in the film. So he introduced him to Howard Hawks, and Howard Hawks says, well, okay, I want you to come down, and I'm going to give you the script, but give it back to me because I only have one copy. Well, the bottom line was they really didn't have a script. What they did have is this elaborate train wreck that they set up, and that was like, the segue for the whole film. But other than that, they really didn't have that much. And it was like Howard Hawks said, I've done this twice before, Rio Bravo and El Dorado. In Rio Bravo, you had, I believe it was Ricky Nelson as the young kid, and Dean Martin as the sheriff who turns into a drunk. Go to El Dorado, you had James Caan as the young kid, and Robert Mitchum as the sheriff who turns into a drunk. And you had two old codgers, Walter Brennan in Rio Bravo and Arthur Honeycutt in El Dorado. So basically you had a little bit of fucking twist on the whole thing here because you had Jorge Rivera as one of John Wayne's, ex-soldiers in this town with Chris Mitchum's character, Tuscarora, where this, guy who set up the train wreck and basically took the money was basically trying to take over the town. And then you had a crazy old man played by Jack Elam and a love interest played by Jennifer O'Neill. Well, like Chris says, they were ad-libbing it all the way through. And Howard Hawks did want him to be in his next film, but unfortunately passed away before that could happen. Well, John Wayne cast Chris in Big Jake as one of his sons, along with his real son, Patrick Wayne. So this was one of those rugged things, with Richard Boone, Bruce Cabot, Maureen O'Hara, Jim Davis, bunch of people. Now, the plot was that they basically kidnapped Jacob McCandless, his grandson, the John Wayne character, and his grandson was played by his actual grandson, Ethan Wayne, and Richard Boone's gang kidnaps him and they're going to hold him for ransom. Of course, they ain't going to pay the ransom, and one of the key scenes is they have this trunk full of money and these gunmen try to take it, and the one son played by Chris Mitchum blows this guy away, but then blowing him away, they blow the lock off the trunk with the money, and it's really cut off up newspaper. Well, the way he wanted to play the scene was he feels really upset that he had to kill somebody over a bunch of cut up newspaper. So when Wayne came on the set that day, he goes, if I had known you wanted to play a crybaby son of a bitch, I would have stayed the hell home. So as Richard Boone told Chris Mitchum, he goes, in this movie, everybody's John Wayne. So after that, he went to Europe to do Summertime Killer, and when he came back, he was going to audition for Steelyard Blues, when he went for the audition, the lady looked at him and he says, "I didn't know you were that Chris Mitchum." She goes, "I can't use you in the film." Well, it seemed that liberal Hollywood had a dim view of John Wayne's conservative views and basically were blacklisting everyone who was close to him or worked with him. So that's when Chris decided, well, I got a lot of offers overseas. I can go do this stuff and probably nobody will ever see it. Well, like he says, the joke was on him because he never figured on VHS, and a lot of the movies he did wound up in the grindhouses, the One-Armed Executioner, the GI Executioner, a bunch of stuff. I mean, he was in demand all over the place, and he bounced around from, Europe, Spain, to the Philippines, working for Bobby Suarez, another crazy director where he said walked around with a loaded .45 strapped to his hip. And he said, when I got there, Bobby handed me 2 treatments, and I said, "What are these? Where's the script?" And he goes, oh, we don't do scripts here. We just basically go by this. So basically, Chris had to sit down and write some semblance of a script to get through these things. But thing was, even though he wasn't doing the caliber of work that his father was doing, he was doing steady work and was, a big star over in Europe and especially the Far East. So, he did come back to do a couple, spots in the United States, like in The Last Hard Men and a couple other ones. But I believe he's still working today, but a lot of his output, and a lot of it was, crazy stuff, shot overseas, either wound up in the grindhouse or wound up on, direct home video VHS stuff. So that explains, the Mitchum's toehold in the grindhouse, so to speak. So that's it for today. Stay safe, stay sick, and mask up, and we'll see you on the flip side.